I want to begin our conversation today with a question that sounds simple, but the answer has puzzled the greatest minds for centuries. If intelligence is the key to success, why do so many incredibly smart people do such incredibly stupid things? We live in a society that worships IQ. We are taught from a young age that if you get the best grades, if you go to the best universities, if you have the fastest processing power in your brain, you will win the game of life. We treat the brain like a computer. The faster the processor, the better the results. But if that were true, if pure raw intelligence was the only predictor of success, then Warren Buffett would probably be driving a truck for a living. I am not the smartest guy in the room. I never have been. I have known men and women with IQs that would break the scale. People who could solve mathematical equations in their sleep that I couldn't even read with a textbook. And yet I have seen these same geniuses, people with brilliance dripping from their fingertips, ruin their lives. I have seen them bankrupt their families. I have seen them destroy their reputations. I have seen them make decisions so catastrophic that a child would have known better. Why? What is the glitch in the human operating system that causes a Ferrari engine to drive straight off a cliff? To understand this, we don't need to look at Wall Street in 2025. We need to look at London in the spring of 1720. We need to look at a man named Isaac Newton. Now, we can all agree that Sir Isaac Newton was smart. He invented calculus. He formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation. He was, by all accounts, one of the most brilliant human beings to ever walk the earth. If anyone should have been able to make a rational, calculated decision, it was him. In 1720, there was a company called the South Sea Company. It was the hottest stock in England. Everyone was talking about it. The maids were talking about it. The dukes were talking about it. It was a mania. Newton, being a smart man, bought some shares early. He watched the price go up. He made a very healthy profit, about 7,000 pounds, which was a fortune back then. And then he did something very sensible. He sold. He took his profit. He looked at the market, used his massive intellect, realized it was getting overheated, and he got out. He was a genius, right? He won. But then something happened that even the father of physics couldn't defend against. He watched his friends stay in. He watched people who were significantly less intelligent than him, people he probably considered fools, getting rich, richer than him. He watched the stock price keep going up and up and up and up. And the psychological pressure began to build. The envy began to rot his rationality. He couldn't stand it. The noise of the crowd drowned out the quiet voice of reason in his head. So Isaac Newton, the man who calculated the distance to the stars, jumped back in, and he didn't just jump in, he went all in. He bought back into the South Sea Company at the absolute peak of the bubble. Weeks later, the bubble burst, the stock crashed, Newton lost everything. He lost his original investment, he lost his profits, he lost his life savings. In today's money, he lost millions. For the rest of his life, he forbade anyone from speaking the word South Sea in his presence. And he famously said, "I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." Think about that. I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people, including his own madness. I am telling you this story because many of you watching this are like Newton. You are smart. You are successful in your careers. You are doctors, engineers, lawyers, entrepreneurs. You are used to being right. You are used to your intelligence solving your problems. But I am here to give you a warning. In the world of decision making, in the world of life and business, intelligence is not enough. In fact, high intelligence without what I call temperament is a liability. It is a danger. If you have an IQ of 160, give 30 points away to someone else. You don't need it. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to be a successful investor or a successful person. What you need is a stable personality. You need a temperament that neither derives great pleasure from being with the crowd nor against the crowd. The thesis I want to present to you over the next 40 minutes is this. Your brain is not one single unit. It is a battleground. On one side, you have the engine that is your IQ, your logic, your ability to process data. On the other side, you have the brakes, that is your rationality, your emotional stability, your patience. The tragedy of the smart person is that they have a massive engine. They have a Ferrari engine, but they often have bicycle brakes. And when they hit a curve at 200 miles per hour, the engine doesn't save them. The engine is what kills them. We are going to explore the specific traps that smart people fall into. We are going to look at why your brain is wired to deceive you. We are going to look at why you are addicted to complexity. And we are going to look at why, despite all your degrees and accolades, you might be one bad decision away from your own South Sea bubble. This is not about how to pick a winning stock ticker. This is about how to rewire your mind so that you don't become the victim of your own biology. This is about survival. Because the market and life itself does not care what your GPA was in college. It does not care how high your IQ score is. It only asks one question: are you rational? And most of the time, for the smartest people, the answer is no. Let's start by dissecting the first and most dangerous trap. It is a mechanism that smart people use to convince themselves that they are right, even when the evidence is screaming that they are wrong. It is the trap of the narrative. The first major trap that ensnares the intelligent mind is what I call the high cost of rationalization, or to put it more simply, the smarter you are, the better you are at lying to yourself. You see, if you ask a man with average intelligence why he made a mistake, he might scratch his head and say, I don't know, I guess I was wrong. He accepts the error, he moves on. But if you ask a brilliant man why he made a mistake, he won't say, I was wrong. He will produce a 30-page dissertation explaining why the market was wrong, why the government was wrong, why the weather was an anomaly, and why his calculation was actually perfect. But the universe failed to align with it. High IQ gives you the ability to process information quickly, but it also gives you the ability to construct complex, convincing narratives to defend your bad decisions. It turns you into a defense attorney for your own ego. This is not just a theory. I watched this play out in real time in the late 1990s with a company called Long-Term Capital Management, or LTCM. If you are too young to remember LTM, you need to study it. It should be mandatory reading for every person who thinks they are smarter than the room. LTCM was not just a hedge fund, it was the dream team of finance. It was led by John Meriwether, a legendary bond trader, but the real stars were his partners. He recruited Myron Scholes and Robert Merton. These weren't just smart guys. These men won the Nobel Prize in economics. They literally wrote the formulas that Wall Street used to price options. They were the Isaac Newtons of modern finance. They had the highest combined IQ of any organization ever assembled in the history of capitalism. They had the best computers. They had the most sophisticated mathematical models. They had access to unlimited capital because banks were falling over themselves to lend them money. How could they lose? The bankers thought they are geniuses. And for a few years, they won. They made 40% returns. They turned money into more money with mathematical precision. They were picking up nickels in front of a bulldozer, but their calculations told them the bulldozer would never move forward. They believed they had solved the market. They believed they had reduced human behavior to a series of bell curves and standard deviations. They believed that risk was a number that could be managed to the fourth decimal point. But here is the problem with models. A map is not the territory. A model is a simplification of the world. It works perfectly until it doesn't. In 1998, Russia defaulted on its debt. It was a black swan event, something their model said was statistically impossible. It was a 10 sigma event, something that should only happen once every billion years or so. But in the real world, unlike in a physics textbook, impossible things happen all the time. When the crisis hit, human beings panicked. They didn't act rationally. They acted emotionally. Liquidity dried up. Fear took over. And the beautiful, elegant mathematical models of LTCM stopped working. Now, a rational person, a person with temperament, would have said, okay, the environment has changed. We need to cut our losses. We need to survive. But the geniuses at LTCM, they couldn't do it. They were trapped by their own intelligence. They were victims of confirmation bias. They doubled down. They believed the market had to revert to their model. They reasoned, we are the Nobel laureates. We know how this works. The market is irrational, but we are rational. They were right in theory, but they were dead in practice. In a matter of weeks, the smartest men in the room lost everything. They lost billions of dollars. They leveraged themselves 25 to 1, sometimes 100 to 1. They put the entire global financial system at risk. The Federal Reserve had to step in and organize a bailout because if LTM went down, they were going to take Wall Street with them. I remember looking at that situation and shaking my head. Here were 16 extremely bright people. They had their own money in the fund. They were already rich. They had hundreds of millions of dollars. They had reputations. They had everything a man could want. And yet, to make a few extra percentage points to earn money they didn't need, to impress people they didn't know, they risked everything they had and needed. That is not intelligent. That is foolish. If you risk what you need in order to get what you don't need, that is foolish. I don't care if you have an IQ of 180. That is a 0 IQ decision. So why did they do it? They did it because they fell in love with their own narrative. They convinced themselves that they were exempt from the laws of gravity. They rationalized their leverage by pointing to their past success. You might say, Warren, I don't run $1 billion hedge fund. This doesn't apply to me, but it does. It applies to you when you refuse to apologize to your spouse because you can construct a perfect logical argument for why you were right. It applies to you when you hold on to a losing business venture because admitting failure would hurt your pride. It applies to you when you ignore your doctor's advice because you read a few articles online and think you know better. Smart people are experts at optimism bias. You think, I know the statistics say that 90% of restaurants fail, but my restaurant won't fail because I have a special recipe. You use your intelligence to find the one piece of data that supports your dream, and you ignore the mountain of data that predicts your demise. You are building a castle on quicksand, but because the architecture of the castle is so beautiful, you refuse to look at the ground. You must learn to be your own harshest critic. You must learn to look in the mirror and say, I might be wrong. You must invite people into your life who are not impressed by your intelligence, people who will tell you the truth. Charlie Munger, my partner, had a saying, I never allow myself to have an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do. Think about that standard. Most smart people don't do that. They form an opinion and then use their brain to build a fortress around it. Charlie used his brain to attack his own fortress. He looked for the cracks. He looked for the evidence that would prove him wrong. That is true rationality. It is the humility to accept that the world is complex and unpredictable, and that your models, no matter how sophisticated, are always flawed. But there is another trap closely related to this one that appeals specifically to the high IQ mind. It is the belief that if something is difficult, complicated, and hard to understand, it must be better. It is the seduction of complexity. This brings us to the second fatal flaw of the high IQ mind. It is a trap that I see CEOs, consultants, and investors fall into every single day. It is the seduction of complexity. Here is a strange paradox. In the academic world, if you write a paper that is simple, easy to understand, and solves a problem in 3 steps, you might get a B. But if you write a paper that is dense, full of jargon, requires advanced calculus to decipher, and solves the same problem in 30 steps, you get an A and a PhD. We are trained to believe that complexity equals value. We are trained to believe that if something is hard to understand, it must be profound. But in the real world, in business, in investing, and in life, complexity is not a sign of intelligence. It is a sign of confusion. And often it is a sign of fraud. I have a very simple rule that has served me well for over 7 decades. I don't look to jump over 7-foot bars. I look around for 1-foot bars that I can step over. Smart people, they love the 7-foot bars. They look at the 1-foot bar, the easy, obvious investment, the simple business model, the clear communication, and they sneer at it. They think, that is beneath me. Anyone can do that. I need to do something that proves how smart I am. So they build what I call Rube Goldberg machines. Do you know what a Rube Goldberg machine is? It is a cartoon contraption where you drop a marble, which hits a domino, which scares a cat, which pulls a string, which eventually wipes your face with a napkin. It is a complex, fragile, inefficient way to do a very simple thing. I see men build Rube Goldberg lives. They create complex tax shelters that end up costing them more in legal fees than they save in taxes. They design investment strategies that require 4 computer monitors and 12 different indicators when simply buying a good company and holding it would have made them rich. They institute corporate strategies with 70-page PowerPoint decks that nobody understands instead of just focusing on making a product that customers actually want. Why do they do this? First, because simplicity is boring. Smart minds crave stimulation. Buying a low-cost index fund and doing nothing for 20 years is incredibly effective, but it is incredibly boring. It provides no dopamine hit. It provides no story to tell at the golf club. So they tinker, they complicate, they add layers, and in doing so, they introduce points of failure. Second, there is a whole industry designed to sell you complexity. Wall Street consultants, lawyers, they cannot charge you high fees for simple advice. If I tell you spend less than you earn and invest the difference, I can't charge you a 2% management fee for that. But if I tell you we need to construct a long-short derivative strategy with a hedge against currency fluctuations, well, now I can charge you a fortune. Complexity is the language of the priesthood. It is designed to keep the layman out. It is designed to make you feel stupid so that you will pay the expert. But you must resist this. You must have the courage to be simple. When I look at a business to buy, I am not using advanced algebra. I am using fourth grade math. If I need a computer to calculate the risk, I don't buy it. If I can't explain the business model to a 12-year-old in 5 minutes, I don't buy it. Look at the businesses Berkshire Hathaway owns. We sell insurance, we sell candy, we sell paint, we sell bricks, we sell furniture, we transport goods on trains. There is nothing sexy about these businesses. There is no quantum computing. There is no AI hype, but they are understandable, they are durable, and they generate cash. My friend Bill Gates once said to me, Warren, you have to buy a computer. This was years ago, and I said, why does it? I wasn't being anti-technology. I was making a point. I only want tools that actually solve a problem I have. If a tool adds complexity without adding significant value, it is a distraction. I see smart people today drowning in tools. They have 10 different productivity apps. They have trackers for their sleep, their steps, their calories, their screen time. They spend more time managing their systems than they do actually living their lives. They are optimizing the engines of the Titanic. You need to ask yourself, where am I making things harder than they need to be? Are you staying in a relationship that requires constant work and therapy and negotiation when maybe the simple truth is that you are just wrong for each other? Are you working a job that requires you to play 4D chess with office politics just for a title when you could be doing honest work somewhere else for the same money and half the stress? There is a beautiful concept called Occam's razor. It states that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. I would add to that, the simplest solution is usually the best one. Don't be impressed by big words. Don't be impressed by thick contracts. Don't be impressed by complex charts. Usually complexity is a mask. It is a mask used to hide incompetence, or worse, to hide risk. Enron was complex. Nobody understood how they made money. Their financial statements were like a puzzle. People thought, wow, they must be so smart. No, they were frauds. Coca-Cola is simple. You sell sugar water, people drink it, they get thirsty, they buy another one. That is a business I can understand. Your goal as a smart person should not be to add layers, it should be to strip them away. You should be ruthless about simplification. Focus on the big variables. In any decision, there are usually only 2 or 3 things that really matter. The rest is noise. The smart person tries to analyze the 50 small variables. The wise person identifies the 3 big variables and ignores the rest. If you can learn to do this, if you can learn to be simple in a complex world, you will have a massive advantage. You will move faster, you will make fewer mistakes, and you will be happier. But there is a catch. Simplicity requires independence. It requires you to not care if people think you are unsophisticated. And that leads us to the third trap, because even if you are rational and even if you prefer simplicity, you are still a social animal, and the pressure to follow the herd to do what everyone else is doing is the most powerful force in the universe. It is a force that can make a genius act like a lemming. Now we arrive at the third trap, and this one is specifically reserved for the experts. It is the trap of hubris. It is the fatal mistake of stepping outside your circle of competence. Here is the thing about intelligent people. They are used to mastering things. You went to medical school, you memorized anatomy, you became a great surgeon, or you went to engineering school, you learned physics, you built bridges, you have a track record of conquering complex subjects. This breeds a dangerous confidence. You start to believe that your intelligence is a universal key that can unlock any door. You think, I am a neurosurgeon. I deal with life and death every day. Surely I can figure out the corn futures market. How hard can it be? It's just numbers. This is the transfer of competence fallacy, and it is how smart people lose their fortunes. I have a very close friend who is a brilliant, brilliant man. He is one of the best in his field. But when he enters the stock market, he gets slaughtered. Why? Because he brings his ego with him. He thinks he can outsmart the market in his spare time while he is competing against people who do nothing else but study that market 24 hours a day. He is a shark in the operating room, but he is a goldfish in the ocean of finance. And the sharks in the ocean love it when a goldfish thinks it is a shark. You have to understand the concept of the circle of competence. Imagine a circle. Inside that circle are the things you truly understand. You understand the economics, you understand the competitive landscape, you understand the products. Outside that circle is everything else. The size of that circle is not very important. You can have a very small circle and get very rich. I know a woman in Omaha who knows everything there is to know about asphalt. She doesn't know anything about semiconductors. She doesn't know anything about pharmaceuticals, but she knows asphalt better than anyone in the world. She stayed in her circle. She bought an asphalt business, and she made a fortune. The size of the circle doesn't matter. What matters, what is absolutely critical, is knowing exactly where the perimeter is. The smart person's problem is that they have a fuzzy perimeter. They think their circle is bigger than it actually is. They wander out into the no man's land of speculation thinking their high IQ will protect them. It won't. Tom Watson, the founder of IBM, said it best, I'm no genius, I'm smart in spots, but I stay around those spots. Smart in spots. That is the secret. You need to define your spots. If you are a tech guy, maybe you understand software companies. Great, stick to that. Don't try to analyze a bank balance sheet if you don't know how to read one. Don't try to predict the price of oil. When you step outside your circle, you are gambling. You are not investing. You are not making decisions. You are making guesses. And a smart man guessing is just as dangerous as a dumb man guessing, maybe more so, because the smart man bets more money on his guess. But even if you stay inside your circle, and even if you prefer simplicity, there is a fourth trap that is perhaps the most insidious of all. It is a social trap. It overrides your IQ, your logic, and your principles. I call it the institutional imperative. In plain English, it is the lemming effect. It is the mindless imitation of the herd. You would think that high IQ people would be independent thinkers. You would think that a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who gets paid millions of dollars would make decisions based on cold, hard logic. But I have sat on the boards of 19 public companies. And let me tell you, I have seen things that would make you question the sanity of the human race. I have seen rational, intelligent CEOs do incredibly stupid things simply because everyone else is doing it. If competitor A buys a corporate jet, competitor B has to buy a corporate jet. It doesn't matter if it makes no economic sense. The CEO of company B feels diminished if he doesn't have one. If company A acquires a terrible business for $1 billion, company B feels the pressure to acquire something, anything, just to show that they are growing. It is not greed that drives the world, my friends. It is envy. And it is the fear of standing out. John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, wrote, "Worldly wisdom teaches that it is better for reputation to fail conventionally than to succeed unconventionally." Let that sink in. Smart people are terrified of looking weird. They are terrified of being the only ones sitting out when the party is going on. Remember the dot-com bubble or the housing bubble in 2008? There were plenty of smart people who knew it was a bubble. They knew the math didn't work. They knew housing prices couldn't go up forever. But they bought anyway. Why? Because their neighbors were buying, because their colleagues were buying, because they were being called idiots for not buying. The pressure to conform is physical. If you go against the herd, your brain releases cortisol, you feel stress, you feel pain, your biology is screaming at you, get back in the group. If you are alone, the lion will eat you. So the smart brain shuts down and the lizard brain takes over. You rationalize, well, maybe this time is different. Maybe they know something I don't. And you follow the lemmings right off the cliff. I have built my career by doing the opposite. When everyone is greedy, I am fearful. When everyone is fearful, I am greedy. This sounds like a catchy bumper sticker slogan, but do you know how hard it is to actually do? It is excruciating. When everyone is making money in a craze and you are sitting on your hands, you look like a fool. You feel like a fool. Your investors call you and scream at you. Why aren't we in crypto? Why aren't we in these tech IPOs? It takes a massive amount of character, not intelligence, but character to say, I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. I am sitting this out. Most smart people don't have that character. They value their social standing more than their judgment. They would rather lose money with the crowd than make money alone. You must fight this institutional imperative. You must realize that the crowd is not wisdom. The crowd is often madness. The average opinion leads to average results. If you want extraordinary results, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable being the only person in the room who isn't clapping. So we have covered the narrative trap, the complexity trap, the hubris trap, and the herd trap. These are the four horsemen of the smart apocalypse. But knowing them is not enough. You need a defense system. You need a firewall for your mind. In the final section of our time together, I want to give you the specific tools, the mental models that Charlie and I use to protect ourselves from our own stupidity. Because the goal is not to be a genius. The goal is simply to be consistently not stupid. And that is harder than it sounds. We have talked about the traps. Now we must talk about the defense. We must talk about the emotional firewall. If you remember one thing from this entire presentation, let it be this. The greatest enemy of the investor and the greatest enemy of the successful man is not the market. It is not the economy. It is not the competition. It is the face staring back at you in the mirror. Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician, once said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This is especially true for smart people. If you are smart, your brain is a high-speed processor. It craves data, it craves action, it craves problems to solve. If there is no problem, your brain will create one just so it has something to do. In investing and in life, this manifests as the itch to act. You feel like you need to be doing something. You check your portfolio every day. You check the news every hour. You tweak your strategy. You buy, you sell. You reorganize your department. You change your diet plan every 2 weeks. You equate activity with productivity. But in the world of decision making, activity is often the enemy of returns. Look at my partner, Charlie Munger. We have shared an office for decades. Do you know what we do most of the time? We read, we talk on the phone, and we sit. We are lethargy bordering on sloth. We don't act for the sake of acting. We wait. We wait for the perfect pitch. In baseball, if you are at the plate, you have a strike zone. If you don't swing at 3 strikes, you are out. But in investing and in business strategy, there are no called strikes. The market can throw you a General Motors at $40 and you don't have to swing. You can stand there with the bat on your shoulder and do nothing. There is no umpire to call you out. You can wait for 6 months. You can wait for 2 years. You can wait until the market throws you a fat pitch, a wonderful business at a fair price, right down the middle, and then you swing, and you swing hard. The smart person strikes out because they swing at bad pitches. They swing because they are bored. They swing because the crowd is yelling, swing, you idiot. I tell students that they would be better investors if I gave them a punch card with only 20 slots in it. These 20 slots represent all the investment decisions they are allowed to make in their entire lifetime. Once you punch the 20th hole, you are done. You can never buy another asset. Think about how that would change your behavior. If you knew you only had 20 bullets in your gun, would you waste one on a speculative crypto coin because your neighbor mentioned it? No. Would you waste one on a company you spent 10 minutes analyzing? No. You would be patient. You would be rigorous. You would double check, triple check, and quadruple check your logic. You would only act when your conviction was one. And I guarantee you the person with the punch card would vastly outperform the person with the Bloomberg terminal who trades 20 times a day. You need to install this punch card mentality in your life. Stop making so many decisions. Stop trying to optimize everything. Save your mental energy for the 2 or 3 decisions a year that actually move the needle. Now, how do we ensure those few decisions are the right ones? How do we use our intelligence effectively? We use a tool that Charlie taught me. It is a tool used by algebraists, but it is rarely used by CEOs. It is called inversion. Always invert. Most smart people try to figure out how to succeed. They ask, how can I help my company win? How can I make this marriage happy? How can I get rich? These are hard questions. They are complex. Charlie flips it. He asks the opposite question. He asks, what would destroy my company? What would guarantee a miserable marriage? What would make me poor? It turns out these questions are much easier to answer. What would make you poor? Well, spending more than you earn, engaging in high-risk leverage, getting addicted to drugs or gambling, trusting dishonest people, destroying your reputation. If you simply identify these things, the things that guarantee failure, and you rigorously avoid them, success becomes the default outcome. Charlie always says, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. It sounds like a joke, but it is profound wisdom. If you want to be a smart decision maker, stop trying to be brilliant. Stop trying to find the next big thing. Instead, focus your intelligence on avoiding stupidity. Avoid the standard stupidities. Avoid debt. I have seen more smart people ruined by leverage than anything else. Leverage is addictive. It creates an illusion of wealth, but it introduces a zero into the equation. And in multiplication, if you multiply anything by zero, the answer is zero. You don't need leverage to get rich, and you shouldn't risk what you have and need for what you don't need. Avoid envy. Envy is the stupidest of the 7 deadly sins. At least with gluttony, you get to eat the food. With lust, you get some pleasure. But envy is pure pain. It is burning yourself with a hot coal, hoping the other person gets burned. Avoid associating with people of low character. We talked about this. You cannot make a good deal with a bad person. Invert it. If you only associate with people of high integrity, you eliminate 90% of the risks in your life. Avoid the man with a hammer syndrome. To a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If you are a lawyer, you think every problem is a legal problem. If you are an engineer, you think every problem is a technical problem. You need to broaden your toolbox. You need to understand psychology. You need to understand history. You need to understand basic probability. But the genius of Charlie Munger was that he didn't just study finance. He studied Benjamin Franklin. He studied biology. He studied engineering catastrophes. He built a lattice work of mental models. When a decision came to him, he didn't just use his finance brain. He ran the problem through his physics brain, his psychology brain, his history brain. If the decision made sense through all those filters, then, and only then, did he punch the card. This is the definition of an emotional firewall. It is a system of checks and balances you build in your own mind to prevent your IQ from running off a cliff. It requires humility. It requires you to admit that you have blind spots. It requires you to slow down when your brain wants to speed up. But there is one final piece to the puzzle, one final principle that ties it all together. It is the concept that protects you when your calculations are wrong, because no matter how smart you are, you will be wrong sometimes. It is the concept of the margin of safety. We have covered a lot of ground today. We have looked at the wreckage of Isaac Newton's fortune. We have walked through the ruins of long-term capital management. We have dissected the arrogance of the expert and the madness of the herd. But there is one final concept I need to leave you with. It is the safety net that catches you when your IQ fails. It is the concept that Ben Graham, my teacher, taught me 70 years ago. He said that the secret of sound investment, and indeed the secret of a sound life, could be distilled into 3 words: margin of safety. What does this mean? If you are an engineer building a bridge, and you know that the heaviest truck that will ever drive across it weighs 10,000 pounds, you do not build the bridge to hold 10,001 pounds. If you are a smart person optimizing for efficiency, maybe you do. You say, why waste materials? The math says 10,000 pounds is the limit. I will build it for 10,001. But the wise engineer builds the bridge to hold 30,000 pounds. Why? Because he knows that his calculations might be slightly off. He knows that the steel might have a microscopic defect. He knows that one day an overweight truck might drive across illegally. He builds a margin of safety, not because he is stupid, but because he respects the unknown. Smart people hate margins of safety. They see cash sitting in a bank account as inefficient. They see it as a drag on returns. They think, I could be earning 5% on that money. Why is it just sitting there? They want to be fully invested, fully leveraged, fully optimized at all times. They drive their life at 100 miles per hour, bumper to bumper, because they are confident in their reflexes. But when you drive with no gap between you and the car in front, you only have to be wrong once. One sudden stop, one patch of ice, one deer running across the road, and you are dead. I have always operated Berkshire Hathaway with a massive margin of safety. We keep billions and billions of dollars in cash. People criticize me for it. They say, Warren, you are losing purchasing power to inflation. Warren, you are an old man. You are too conservative. But cash is like oxygen. You don't notice it 99% of the time when it is there. But the moment it is gone, it is the only thing you notice. When the financial crisis of 2008 hit, when the panic set in, when the smart people who were leveraged 30-1 were begging for a lifeline, we had the oxygen. We didn't have to panic. We could play offense while everyone else was playing defense. You need to build a margin of safety into your life. Do not live paycheck to paycheck just to drive a better car. That is driving without a buffer. Do not borrow money to invest in the stock market. That is building a bridge that holds exactly 10,000 pounds. Leave room for error. Leave room for bad luck. Leave room for your own stupidity, because I promise you, no matter how high your IQ is, you will have moments of stupidity. We all do. The goal of life is not to get rich the fastest. It is to ensure that you never get poor. If you can avoid the zeros, the compounding will take care of the rest. So let's summarize the curriculum of this anti-genius school. First, beware of your own narrative. When you find yourself explaining away a mistake with a complex story, stop. You are rationalizing, not reasoning. Second, reject complexity. If you can't explain it with a crayon, don't touch it. Seek the simple, durable truths. Third, stay in your circle. Draw a line around what you know and treat everything outside that line as a minefield. Do not let your ego drag you into games you don't understand. Fourth, resist the herd. When everyone is running towards the cliff, have the courage to stand still. Your cortisol will scream, but your wallet will thank you. And finally, always carry a margin of safety. Never bet the farm. Never risk what you have and need for what you don't need. There is an old saying, it is better to be a rational fool than a brilliant lunatic. The brilliant lunatics make the headlines. They're on the magazine covers. They make $1 billion in a year and then they blow up and disappear. But the rational fools, the tortoises, we just keep putting one foot in front of the other. We don't try to win the race on the first lap. We just make sure we finish. You are watching this because you want to be successful. You want to provide for your family. You want freedom. My advice to you is to stop trying to outsmart the world. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be the most disciplined. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. It is the ability to say no when your brain wants to say yes. It is the ability to sit quietly in a room when the world is going mad. I am 95 years old. I have seen many smart men rise, and I have seen many smart men fall. The ones who stayed standing were not the ones with the highest IQs. They were the ones who knew their limits. Be humble, be patient, be rational. And if you do that, you won't just be smart, you will be wise. Thank you for listening. If you want to continue this journey of rationality, if you want to protect your mind from the traps of the modern world, subscribe. We have much more to discuss. Go out there and don't be smart, be wise. Thank you for watching.